The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
Man, that sunset is gorgeous.
Grill, patio, sunset. Hard to get better than that. Unless you're browsing Carvana's inventory while you soak it all in.
Oh, burger time.
So sit back, get comfortable. Carvana's got thousands of cars under $20,000 just waiting for you.
I could stay here forever.
Carvana, where car buying meets comfort meets convenience. Download the app or visit Carvana.com today.
Welcome to another Britflicks.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's returning guest is Mark Jenkin with his new film, ENYS Men. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Now, hold on a second. Let me get this right. It's ENYS MEN, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's as if it's spelled M-A-N-E.
Yeah.
So it comes from the Cornish word menhir, which means standing stone or long stone. And main being the first syllable meaning stone.
Okay. Now, that is released in cinemas in UK and Ireland on the 13th of January.
Yep.
I was saying to you before we started recording that I was at an extreme metal concert. And one of the bands that's become my favourite new band are called We Lost the Sea, which is a really enigmatic title of a band, never mind a song.
Yeah.
And I only say that because the first question I wrote down is, what is it about you and the sea? Is it trapping us? Or is it endless possibilities? Or is it something else for you?
For me, it's just always been there. We're in Cornwall. We're surrounded by sea on three sides, and a huge river on the fourth side. And where I am in West Cornwall, it's only going to take a little bit of a sea level rise, and we'll be an island ourselves. So. I don't really think about it too much. The only time I really think about the sea is when I'm far away from it and I notice that it's not there, and I feel very different. We've got friends up in Wales, up in Montgomery, sort of on the Welsh English border, Shropshire border, and I think that's the place I've been to over the last few years, which is the furthest away from the sea I've ever been. And I feel like I'm on a different planet when I'm there.
Really?
Yeah, and I love it. I've sort of grown to love it, and the rolling hills and the countryside and all that kind of stuff, but I'm much more of a coastal person than a countryside person. You know, people say like Cornwall's rural, but I always think of Cornwall being coastal.
And obviously this comes on the back of Bait and the relative success that had, which I'm guessing must have come as a hell of a pleasant surprise, because I remember our conversation last time was you basically returned to your own, like, how much pleasure you got out of film. You weren't thinking about how you might or might not make something popular.
No, I went back to making films that I wanted to make and doing things that excited me. And I think the success of Bait is a real good advert for staying within your comfort zone, I think.
But with what happened with Bait comes expectation. So how did you as a filmmaker hold on to what was essentially your strength as a filmmaker, when I'm guessing there's that, oh my God, what does the second film mean kind of thing? Yeah,
well, we had a strategy. I spoke to Denzel Monk, who's the producer of ENYS MEN, and Matthew Bates, who's my agent, and we all sort of agreed that the best thing to do was just to go again like Bait on a small scale, quite a small scale film, same cast, same crew, different genre, but try and make something small scale, get it done quickly, get it out there before we thought about it too much, really. And that was the plan. And then we had this pandemic come along, which sort of scuppered that idea, really, slowed everything down, but also gave me a lot of time to think, which wasn't necessarily a good thing, because I did start thinking then what people might expect from a second film. But I think I'd spent so much time with Bait in Q&A saying I never thought about the audience and I was only making the film for me, and if people liked it, that was a bonus. That I really had to sort of stick with that, and I kept reminding myself that was my kind of mantra, to not think about the audience and just to stick, stay loyal to the way that I wanted to work and the way that I enjoyed working, and stay loyal to the people that I'd been working with. So it was, I was certainly more conscious that there might be an audience waiting for this film.
So when ENYS MEN was announced, I suppose, in the news, which was, like you say, almost pre-pandemic, if I remember rightly, it wasn't that long after Bait had sort of been doing the rounds. So you were in sort of stasis for a while with it, or was you still able to make it?
What, with COVID? Yeah. No, we were sort of shut down before we started. Okay. So it was March, wasn't it? March 2020 when the sort of lockdown first happened at the end of that month. We were due to start shooting in May and June, and we were just shut down. I mean, it was kind of perfect timing for us. It couldn't have. Obviously, a global pandemic isn't ideal, but if you're going to have a global pandemic, then we were in the perfect position to be shut down, because I think everything was in place. All the contracts were signed. We were ready to go, but we hadn't started shooting and spending money. So, and I knew a lot of films who just went by the wayside because they were in development and the development deal just went away, or films that were in production and they got shut down because they couldn't carry on working. So we kind of hit a bit of a sweet spot, really, and we were just put on hiatus we just put it back a year. The film had to be shot in the springtime, really, so it was a no-brainer. As soon as we knew we couldn't shoot, we just said, right, we'll put it back a year and see where we are in a year's time. We ended up shooting again. We were still in lockdown when we shot it, effectively, but by then you could work. If it was work, we could do it, but it was it was quite strict controls over what we could do, but it all fed into the way that I wanted to work anyway.
It's not overtly period, but you could call it a period because it is set in 1973 as it sets itself up. What's significant about that year specifically, or what is significant about making it a period piece that you would have lost if you'd have tried to make the same story contemporary?
The significance of 1973 is, it sounds really flippant, but I really love the way that the date 1973 looks when it's written down.
Nothing flippant about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an aesthetic consideration. I knew that date was going to be written over and over again. So.
I like the sound of the word elbow.
Yeah. So that was why it was 1973. It was always going to be in the 1970s because I wanted it to be a kind of homage to those 1970s films that I think it was Kim Newman who said were sort of almost horror films. They were kind of horror films without being overtly horrific. Yeah. So I wanted it to fit in that kind of era. I'm writing another film at the moment, which is a period piece, but it's set in 1990. And I think there's a real significance of making a film, especially if there's an element of mystery in it that predates the internet and mobile phones, because they're a real easy, they're real handy problem-solving devices. And if you haven't got that problem-solving device, then it puts the onus on the audience. So it was important that this was a simpler time and a more difficult time to communicate. I think was quite key.
There's very little dialogue in this because largely we're with one character, the volunteer, for I guess 85% of the film.
Yeah.
But you play with sound a lot. I was interested to read that you don't record the sound of what you're getting, but when we watch the film, the crunch of foot and gravel, the generator, the radio interference and stuff are very, very important parts of at least the audio aesthetic to the film. So,
yeah, I think they have to be because there is no dialogue, or there's very little dialogue. The dialogue, without meaning to sound pretentious, the dialogue is in the sound design. Everything in the film, I wanted to kind of feel like it was sentient. That everything was in dialogue with everything else. And I don't record any location sound.
Is that like because when we talked about Bait, you didn't, your choice not to record the dialogue was about expediency, that you didn't have to be you could more run and gun without needing to get the dialogue there and then. You just get the action.
Yeah, and I can't record sync dialogue with that camera anyway. because the camera doesn't run. It's not a sync camera, so you can't record sync sound. So you could record dialogue, but you'd have to retime it all in the edit anyway. But for me, it's mostly like a practical. Well, it started as a practical decision. You know, it's a very noisy camera. It's a non-sync camera, but also I'm shooting in. I haven't got complete control over locations. So for ENYS MEN, you know, there's a lot of it is around an isolated cottage on an island, and now that cottage isn't particularly isolated, and it's not on an island. There's a very busy farm next to it, and there's ramblers all around it, all over the moor. So to convey a sense of isolation sonically would be very difficult if I was recording location sound. Visually, it's very easy because I just don't film where the farm is and I don't film the ramblers. Although if you look very closely at ENYS MEN, it has been pointed out that there is a rambler in the back of one
Ghost
shot.
in the machine.
Yeah, there is. There's somebody on the horizon. So it was always a practical, logistical decision originally, but it's become a creative decision now to the point where the film that we're going to shoot next has got a lot more characters and a lot more dialogue, but we've just taken the decision that we're going to not record any dialogue and post-sync everything because of the control and the sort of quality it gives the films.
But I like the idea of adding in the sound of a generator, adding in the sound of foot and gravel, because it helps you really emphasize the point, and it puts us into the characters, sort of almost like the cinematic world of the character as opposed to the real world of the character.
Yeah, and quite often I will go back to the locations to pick up the real sounds of places, but often I won't, because I just think partly I can't be bothered to revisit every single individual location.
Yeah.
Because I just haven't got the time, because I work so much on my own. But then that forces me to then visit things like sound effects records and stuff like that to try and pick up stuff that doesn't quite fit. You know, there's a sort of element of plausibility about it, but it doesn't quite fit. So like
it's almost like mechanical versus natural.
Yeah,
in a way, even though it is still probably recorded from a natural thing.
Yeah, and it will be, but it'll be slightly out of place. So that, like, the wind on the island is like an Arctic whistling wind, which you wouldn't have on the island. You know, it's probably something that's been used on like Frozen Planet or something. But I put it on the film, and suddenly you've got this Arctic whistling wind around this cottage, and it's a level of abstraction without being really overt about it. It's just something slightly off with it.
Yeah, I think, but it just it lends itself to cinema in a way that because.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing I love abstracting the sound, because I think it's much more sophisticated way of doing it visually, and it's much easier to do it with audio. I think a lot of the time it's very difficult to have a visual abstraction within the frame that is kind of, that lasts. Quite often you'll look at an image and go, oh, that's a bit weird, and then you work out why it's weird. Yeah. When it's to do with sound, quite often you don't ever work out why it's weird, and actually consciously you don't even appreciate it's weird. There's just something slightly off. I think Lynch is the king of it. You know, he'll just do something. There'll be like one of the sound beds will be playing backwards or something. Yeah. You won't notice that it's playing backwards. You won't go, oh, hold on, that's playing backwards. Something will be uneasy about it that you'll never unpick as an audience member.
But the nature of how you've made the rest of the film, you make us hypersensitive to it in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose, and I did do it in Bait as well at certain times, but it was much more, it's signposted much more in ENYS MEN. Yeah.
Because you fracture it in terms of where we are in time and place.
Yeah.
You know, we're never quite always sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And in a way, some of the sounds get us back to a place that we understand in a way.
Yeah. And then hopefully you get back to a place where you understand, and then the rug's pulled out again. You know, it's like the sequence at the end of ENYS MEN where the radios kind of swap sounds. So the AM radio starts acting like the Marine VHF radio and vice versa. I've just watched the 35mm print here. It's part of the reason why we're here, just to sign off the print, and I haven't seen it for a little while, and I did notice a few, and actually it's now listening to an optical soundtrack, it sounds different than the DCP soundtrack, and I've started noticing things. Oh yeah, I remember doing that. I've never noticed it in the DCP, and now suddenly I'm noticing it again. Okay,
so it's optimizing something that you wanted to have there.
And actually it's made some mistakes audible, that weren't necessarily audible when we were doing the mix, but now it's on an optical soundtrack. We've got, that's quite a sharp fade out there. Why did I do that? And it's just because, it's in the same way that it looks different, it also sounds different when it's a print.
Now, Mary Woodbine is an actor you've worked with before.
Woodvine.
Oh, Woodvine. Sorry, my own typo. Sorry. Is someone you've worked with before. She plays the volunteer who, like we established before, is really central to the film. For that kind of role where you're so much in the spotlight, you've worked with her before, so there's already some trust there, I'd imagine, and wanting to work you again. But obviously, this is a little different than working behind the bar in a pub that she did in Bay. So what's the conversation?
Well, no, she was the second homeowner.
Oh, sorry,
in Bay.
Yes, sorry. What's the conversation like for that kind of role where the expectation is to sort of, give everything, isn't it, really?
Well, yeah, Mary's my partner as well.
Okay. So that makes life easier.
Yeah. Really. Or, in some ways. In some ways, it's, it's trickier as well, because obviously we've got a personal relationship and domestic relationship and all that kind of stuff, and then working together as well. But I'd hope there's sort of trust between the two of us. I sort of trust her implicitly with the role, and hopefully she trusts me in terms of, the filmmaking side of it. I always wanted to give her a film that she could almost like carry single-handedly, which she does with this film. Really, I've worked with her several times before, and always in supporting roles. But this was, and she wasn't always going to play the volunteer in this film. In fact, I was quite wary of casting her, because I didn't want to be, I didn't want it to appear nepotistic, that I was just, writing something for my partner and casting her in it. But and for a time, she was almost like acting as the casting director for the film, because she was suggesting her contemporaries and her peers as possibilities for people who could play the volunteer. But eventually, I sort of came around and admitted to myself that I'd written the part for her.
Okay.
And I said to Denzel, producer and Film 4, the execs and everything, I said, I'd really like Mary to play the part. And everybody pretty much said we always thought it was going to be Mary who was going to be in it. So, yeah. So it was, it's interesting. I think it's been a really good experience working together. It's funny because it was only a 21-day shoot, so actually it's quite a minor thing in terms of time working together.
But there's cabin
on the
fever
film.
on a film shoot, isn't it? It's not normal amount. It's not like a normal working day.
No, but it's funny that the life of the film really sort of dwarfs the actual process of making the film, especially the shooting of the film.
Yeah.
So what's been really nice is to develop the film together, shoot the film together, and then now be able to do the promotion of the film together, which has been really good.
Yeah.
Like going to Cannes together, and as you were there, the two of us being able to get up on stage and introduce the film that was a real magic moment, because she's been there with me before when I've done stuff, but she's been there to support me, or vice versa. When she's been doing something, I've been there to be there with her because I'm her partner. But to go up there and be sort of kind of co-authors of this work that's something that will stay with me forever. So that's been amazing.
Yeah, because I interviewed Joel Truglio, who you might know if you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's done his first horror film.
Mary is a massive Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan. I don't watch it, but she does.
So she'll know, when she listens to this, Sergeant Boyle is the character who plays. Well, he just directed his first horror film, and it played at Fright Fest, and his lead is his wife.
Right.
And when they shot the movie, at the end of each day, they slept separately.
Right.
They kept separate in terms of, it was like the working relationship for the shoot.
We haven't got the resources for that. No, but that is funny, because you do, I'll be setting up a shot, a close up of her, like on the harbour side or something, and I'd set up the camera and I'd be stood 2 foot away from her, looking down the viewfinder at her, and a light will be being tweaked, or some production design will be sorted out. So we'll have a minute where we'll be talking non-film stuff, and it will be sort of like, did you remember to buy the cat food? No, I thought you were getting it. And you have these moments of sort of domestic, not always fraught, but sometimes moments of, when it comes down to things like childcare and stuff like that. It's like, we got to get home and, we finish early today, we should definitely sit down and have a family meal. And, you know, you have to keep all of that's it goes without saying, that's all really important stuff. It's very difficult to prioritize that stuff when you are in that mad sort of, 21-day intense shoot that we were in. So it was. I think we came through it really well. Mary always says we had one slight Barney on the shoot where, the rest of the crew kind of just walked away and pretended that they were doing other stuff. I remember two, but she remembers one. So maybe one was just in my head. Given how close you are then going into the film, for obvious reasons, what did she do on the shoot that can you think of an example where what she chose to do as the actor, and obviously not as your wife, that surprised you and was obviously important to what you might have imagined the volunteer to be like? Is there any examples of that? She brought her extrovert nature to a character that was written as an introvert. We're very different. I would say quite an extreme introvert, and she's quite an extreme extrovert. Okay. So every character that I write is introverted. I can't help, I can't write extroverts. They're unbearable if I write extroverts. So all of my characters are introverts. So that's a really important moment of collaboration, is bringing in somebody who's getting the input of somebody who's an extrovert to bring a complexity to the characters that I write. So she constantly surprised me with what she was doing with the character, considering how little I was allowing her to do. She didn't have the luxury of dialogue, for example. Yeah. But the amount that she can do physically with very little gesture. So what? Give me an example then of where she's being how you perceive extrovert with what is clearly, like you say, more of an introverted role in the film. Well, just being reactive. I think her reactions are externalized rather than internalized. And there's. I just think there's stuff that she will do with a look that I don't understand how she does it. I don't understand how she can ask a question of an audience just with a very simple look. Yeah. That constantly surprises me, but it actually doesn't constantly surprise me, because I wouldn't have cast her if I didn't know she could do that. Yeah. Because that's part of the pleasure of watching the film, is that the way she's moving about and the way she's looking. Yeah. It's part of what we're not clear about, but we're completely compelled to keep watching. Yeah, and I think there's so much going on inside. There has to be, because there's no outlet for it, so it's all going on inside. And in some ways, that's a result of there being no dialogue and the way it's written. But mostly, it comes from the character who's sort of portraying the actor who's portraying that character. And she's got, all of her. I think. She's a fantastic stage presence, and she's a very funny performer. She's sort of known for comedy and on the stage, intuitively a very funny performer and very physical, amazing physicality. And although it's a physical role in terms of she's constantly...
The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
Man, that sunset is gorgeous.
Grill, patio, sunset. Hard to get better than that. Unless you're browsing Carvana's inventory while you soak it all in.
Oh, burger time.
So sit back, get comfortable. Carvana's got thousands of cars under $20,000 just waiting for you.
I could stay here forever.
Carvana, where car buying meets comfort meets convenience. Download the app or visit Carvana.com today.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
On the move in the film, I don't allow her to communicate much through gesture. There's certainly very little communication through humour and almost no communication through dialogue. So it kind of amazes me how complex the character can be when you take all of that away.
I was going to say, you almost make her like a mouse in a wheel. You give her there's a lot of routine to the film, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, we just watched the print a minute ago, and the bit the bit that isn't routine is her interaction with the character that Ed plays, the boatman. And I think that scene really gets me when she says goodbye to him. And it got me today. I haven't seen the film for a few weeks, and it really got me that moment. And part of it is because it's a bit of human interaction that hasn't existed throughout the rest of the film, but it's the way they play it. And there's one line that she delivers that just floors me, and I don't think of it as Mary. I think of it as that character, and it really gets me.
Yeah. And just going back to that idea of routine that dominates, obviously there's the taking the records of the flowers, which is the job, I guess, of the volunteer.
Yeah.
But there's this other routine, which is dropping a stone down into a hole in the floor, into a cave, down to a cave. What's that? I've seen the film twice now, and I've enjoyed watching her do it, but I don't know apart from what we get revealed of what she's seeing down there, but what's that routine part of? What is that symbolizing?
I'm not going to say what it symbolizes.
That's not fair, man.
It is part of that routine. Routine. I think routine is very.
You mean like shit? Like that character has added it into her routine of.
That's how I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's routine's almost like a crutch, isn't it, to lean on? I think this film was written before the pandemic and before I'd even ever considered what a pandemic might be like. By the time we came to shoot it, and certainly by the time I edited it, I'd lived through a pandemic like we all had, and I think the significance of routine had become really interesting. So a friend of mine who's a photographer sent me a photo of me leaning out of our upstairs bedroom window during the pandemic, and it's just a photo of me looking out of the window. But I remember the day that was. Well, I don't remember the day. I remember the time of day it was taken, because every day during the pandemic, they would walk past the house at a certain time, and we would say hello out the window, and that was really important during that time.
Yeah.
Now it would be mental for me to say, oh yeah, at a certain time of day I look out the window, but it's all relative to what you're doing. So it became there was a synergy between what she was going through and what people went through during lockdown, I think. So those minor, pardon the pun, those little things that you do take on great significance. And if they're subverted in any way, like if you forget to do them or an outside force subverts them, they become quite important, They become like.
I started writing short stories every morning during lockdown.
Yeah,
and I've continued to do it.
Yeah,
because I've enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, but it was probably a survival technique
absolutely.
To start with, wasn't it?
I wanted a pat on the back every day.
Yeah,
and it gave me that.
Yeah, well, so just going out and doing the 1 hour or half hour, whatever it was supposed to be, exercise. We used to go out in the tiny little bit of a field behind the house and run up and down the field, and it was to not do that. I don't remember any days when we didn't do that. I think if we hadn't done that, we would have all been in such a tailspin of where we were in the day and what was going on.
I guess that makes sense in terms of the limited scope of what you show us the volunteer has got to do on the island, the idea that she would manipulate her own routine to make it more interesting or more survivable, however you want to put it.
Yeah, and it's superstitions as well. That's the idea that you do something because you're superstitious, and maybe you can't remember why you started doing it. But I've got so many, going back to being a coastal dweller, the coast of Cornwall, everybody's riddled with superstitions. things they have to do. And it all comes from people making their living on the sea and risking their life going to sea and not having any control. So inventing things that give you the idea that you're in control of your own destiny. So, I saw the vicar on the way to the harbour today. That means I can't go to sea because it's a bad omen. You know, these little things that people will put to fool them into thinking they've got some kind of control over their destiny. And I'm just riddled with those things. So that's all in that character.
I was interested in your Q&A when you did your world premiere at Cannes, how you talked about the fact that there was an influence on you before you went into it. Like everyone said, well, Bait's obviously a horror film. And you began to sort of go, well, maybe I did make one. So then you set out to make one. And I think if I remember rightly, you kind of said, but I didn't make one.
No. Well, I tried to write one and then realised I hadn't written one.
I still think it is. I still think.
But if you read the script, it isn't. In the same way that if you read Bait reads like a 90-minute soap opera episode.
Okay.
But because of the form, there's a suggestion of
the sound, the colours, the holding of frame and things like that.
Yeah, just the disconnect between sound and picture, the fact it's posting, all of these added layers of abstraction, the non-linear way that it's cut together. I think all of that lends itself to being a genre film. It's like one of my heroes, Lawrence Gordon Clark, who did the Ghost Stories for Christmas for BBC, when he was... when he moved from documentary to drama at the BBC, he was assigned a cameraman and an editor. Yeah. I think this is right. One of them or both of them said to him, you know, what you've got to understand is now you're doing drama and you're doing horror. Horror is the one genre that where you're constantly drawing attention to the form. You know, whether it's with sound or whether it's with an edit or a crash zoom or something like that, you're constantly drawing attention to the form in order to elicit a reaction from the audience. And I think that's what Bait did. Bait constantly reminded the audience that the audience were watching a film, which made it feel like a horror without there being any horror within it. There was a sense of foreboding. There was a sense that you couldn't quite trust what the next edit was going to be or the next sound cue was going to be. And so when people pointed that out, I thought, it'd be fun to do a horror film. So then I set out to overtly write a horror script. But I'm not very good at writing scripts with huge amounts of context, backstory, dramatic contrivance, all of that kind of stuff. So actually, and on all of those things... I kind of needed in a genre screenplay, I think, a conventional genre screenplay.
I'd agree with that.
So when I read it back, it was like, I failed. I haven't written a horror film. But then I thought, actually, no, the horror will come from the form, the actual...
So in a way, you're the ingredient that makes it a horror when you start to make it. And in some ways, I quite like the idea of being given a screenplay that's very straight, and then subvert it through the making of it, which I think is what Bait was. You know, so when but then Bait, you could draw parallels with, say, Pinter stuff. You know, the way that if a character does something absurd, it almost makes it uneasy. You know, you're forever on edge then because you're like, I don't know what to expect.
Yeah. But then the consequences aren't necessarily horrific.
No,
they might be sort of unsettling or you might not be able to make sense of them. But I wanted it with ENYS MEN, I wanted, you know, the consequences to be horrific. Because for me, horror, the scariest horror for me is when time stops making sense. And I think, again, I thought about that a lot during the pandemic, you know, the idea that it was bad. You know, we were undoubtedly living through...
I've started to say, basically, those 2 years don't count. If I've not seen you for 4 years, then I've not seen you for 2, really. Yeah. Which is a weird way to think about 2 years.
But I think the comforting thing was every night, you know, and also we were in a house with a 11, 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So his well-being was the priority, you know, making it sort of normalizing the situation for him and that kind of stuff. But so a lot of bedtimes was like, see you in the morning, sleep well, sweet dreams, that kind of stuff. And going to bed safe in the knowledge that the sun would come up in the morning and gradually things would get better. They might get worse first, but eventually...
normal somewhere over the horizon.
Yeah, we'll get to where we are now, where things aren't normal and there's a huge amount of trauma that everybody's dealing with and a lot of people have lost people. But things will get better, you know? Because every morning the sun comes up and every time the sun comes up is a new day, and every time there's a new day, there's new hope. For me, horror is when that stops happening.
Yeah.
So time stops making sense. One of my favorite horror films from recent times, or reasonably recent times, was the Blair Witch, the third Blair Witch film.
Really? That's a rare call. But go on.
Yeah. And I know it's a deeply flawed film, and I think, you know, most films are quite flawed.
Yeah, I don't.
And I think horror films more than any are flawed, but I think there's hardly any horror films I've ever seen that I haven't looked at and gone, oh wow, that's a good idea. You know, horror filmmakers are always innovating. They're always doing interesting stuff. There's always something to take out of a horror film, unless they're the most cynically rehash or you know, made purely for money. There's always something interesting going on in horror. And with that Blair Witch film, it freaked me out when time stopped making sense, when it didn't get light the next day. And I can't remember very much about the film, but I remember being totally spooked by the idea that time had stopped making sense.
Yeah.
And I think
Ari Aster does that very well in Midsummer because it never goes dark.
Yeah.
So you kind of go, am I in today, tomorrow?
Yeah. Peter Strickland in Barbarian Sound Studio, when, you know, and it all stops making sense when he's trying to get his flight ticket reimbursed, and then they say, oh no, you weren't on that flight, and it's like, oh, hold on, you know, when reality, that's the horror I like, those little shifts in. But
the volunteer has no one to confirm or deny the shifts in time that you're playing with your film. As an audience member, we're forever playing catch up in terms of the real and the unreal, which is even more unsettling from a viewer's point of view, because this is unsettling. I can confirm that. You know, oh my God, what are we going to do? Then you're kind of going with what's the plan to get out of this. Whereas what we're watching, we're about 2 steps behind. It felt like a lot of times.
Well, yeah, no, I did. That's why I wanted it to be like a fever dream where you've got nothing to hold on to. Yeah. You know, and what that would do to an audience. I mean, the film I'm working on at the moment, I'm writing at the moment, is much more what you just described, where the audience are with the protagonist trying to make sense of a situation that's weird. Yeah. Whereas with ENYS MEN, what I wanted was the film, the actual materiality of the film, of the object, to be nonsensical, to be illogical. And you know, like a dream. Because you I mean, we've not mentioned it yet, but you know, you've got a standing stone plays a major role in this film. Yeah, and it's almost like a standing stone has become sentient, which is terrifying in of itself. Or the other way around,
maybe.
Yeah. If you believe the Cornish myths, then all the religious myths. Yeah. Then the standing stones were all petrified humans who had sinned in one way or another.
Right. Okay.
That was the Christian telling of it.
Okay. See, I've done some work into black metal for a film I've been developing, and what I found out during the research is the church burnings, which were horrifying in the 90s, was a kind of crude attempt to destroy Christianity and take Norway back to pre-Christian pagan times. Yeah. So they thought these emblems of what was the new Christianity, is what we need to get rid of that will return us to some place that is ours. Yeah. I mean, slightly misguided, but
well,
it's weird to see it like written. And that was at first I thought it was just young people being stupid. Yeah, but there's some sort of warped logic to what they were doing.
No, they're never being stupid. They're always there's always some mission behind it, isn't there?
Another part of the sound is the sound you make, not the sound that you go and find something to discombobulate, but literally the music and the soundscape that you've created around this film. And at times, you know, I mean, when I was able to watch it for the second time, I was like, this sound is literally assaulting me at times. You know, it's not, you're not just giving us some sonic colour to add to what I'm seeing. You're really sort of going a completely juxtaposed to what I'm looking at in some senses. Yeah. What was your process behind developing the sound for it? Where were you coming from for that?
I dealt with the sound in the same way that I dealt with the colour, really. Mm-hmm. I think early on when we decided the film was going to be colour, my thinking was, if it's going to be colour, it's going to be a hell of a lot of colour. Yeah. And with the sound design, I think, you know, if I'm going to do the sound, then I'm going to really do the sound. There's not going to be much subtlety in this. It's going to be as austere and as brutal as the visuals are. You know? in the same way that the film crash zooms and goes into extreme close-ups, and the sonic landscape was going to be the same. You know, it was going to be. It wasn't really going to take any prisoners.
Yeah, you were kind of like that idea that the Earth's vibrating.
Yeah, well, we're just looking at it in the cinema here, and the ceiling was definitely vibrating in the last 20 minutes of the film. And Denzel, the producer, actually did say to me, "Do you think we need to warn some of the older cinemas about this, because the ceiling could come in, because the bass rumble on some of it is insane." Yeah, but I kind of do it all at the same time. I do the picture cutting, and I do a lot of the Foley, and I do the soundtrack all concurrently. So I have an analog synthesizer next to my. Oh, so you're like him, you're playing along with. Yeah, quite often do. So you've not written this music? No. Well, I don't write. I can't. Because I was fascinated by that idea of you doing all, having to do. Like have 3 plates on your head balanced all the time. That seems like a... Yeah, well, I do. I stand on a piece of wooden flooring that I've built up in the studio, and I do the footsteps on there. A lot of that gets replaced by the Foley people and Rich, who did the final mix, kind of replaced some of my Foley recording, or a lot of my Foley recording, because it was quite badly recorded. But I have to record that in order to do the picture edit, because there's no dialogue to rely on. So a lot of the picture cutting is relying on the rhythms of the Foley and the sound design. But I also record a lot of stuff to a tape loop. I build an infinite tape loop of 1/4-inch tape between 2 reel-to-reel machines, and I sort of loop a lot of stuff in that way, and that's all happening while I'm cutting the picture. And that's not very subtle, it's a sort of infinite decaying loop that kind of is quite difficult to control. Okay. So that's why the sound isn't particularly subtle at times. Okay, so it's like you're not worried about this about any kind of sophisticated music. I can't do sophisticated music. No, I figured that's what you're saying in a way, but I don't think that, it doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. I did try, and when I did the soundtrack for Bait, it was very much just sort of chord progressions, which were then reverbed and echoed to infinity, so it just sounded like drones. Yeah. So I never really intended for that to be on the final film, and then we kind of all sort of fell in love with the soundtrack, so left it on the film. And then off the back of that, Invader Records put it out as a soundtrack, which did quite well and was quite well received. So this time I thought, I'm going to do the score again, but it had gone to my head a little bit, and I was thinking about the record. While I was doing the soundtrack for the film, I was thinking, wow, of all the things, like when I started this interview, like about the idea of making the follow-up to Bait, it was, I might make another record. Yeah, exactly. That was the bit, and I was, the opening theme, I was thinking, God, this could be a single, maybe put this out as a 7-inch, and I was gone totally insane with that. So, how did you rein yourself in? Well, just by listening back to what I'd done. Right. Gone, okay. Actually, no, I can't write a melody that people are going to go, oh, wow, that's amazing. But what I can do is I can create a soundscape that works for the film. So I ended up creating a lot of the score. Has got a lot of the Foley within the score, which is great. We're going to perform the score live here in NFT1 on the 1st of May. That's all unconfirmed, but at the moment that's the plan, and it's going to be quite complicated because in order to do when we did Bait, all we did was removed my score from the film, and then Gwenno came in and performed her own score. With this, when we removed the score, we're going to be removing loads of the sound design and Foley. So not only is it going to be a live score event, but we're going to actually have to do some of the Foley live and all that kind of stuff. So it's all, the score is more complicated this time. Right, now it'd be a miss. The only thing we haven't talked about is the colours. The greens are verdant, the red coat is very red, and you've already referenced a certain sort of 70s style of cinema that you enjoy. Yeah, and there's a very iconic red coat in 70s cinema that Nick Rogue filmed. Never heard of him. With that, that choice of wardrobe and obviously red against green works really well in the film, but obviously there was that little bit in me that was like... It was genuinely an accident and a coincidence. That I'm massively influenced by Nick Rogue. Yeah. He's probably, he's probably my favourite director. I would have thought his approach to cinematography and editing, a massive influence on me. The red coat was an accident. That originally it was going to be a yellow coat, so she was going to have a yellow coat on, and the red coat was going to be the one that she finds washed up, and she was going to find it in the water, and she was going to spot it several times through the film, just floating below the surface, and it was going to look like a pool of blood. And then eventually she sticks a stick into the water, pulls out the red coat, realizes it isn't blood, and a sense of relief at that point. But then actually removing that from the water kicks off all of this other stuff. So it's much more disastrous than it being simply blood. I then decided that it was going to be too tricky to shoot that in the water, so it was going to be washed up. At the same time, I thought if she's got long brown hair, yellow Mac, blue jeans, I thought people are going to think that I'm ripping off Charlotte Gainsbourg's costume in Antichrist. So
you can't win here, can you?
So I switched it and said, actually, she'll have the red coat, and the yellow coat will be the one that's washed up. And then while we were shooting, first day, I think I overheard a conversation, somebody saying, "Oh yeah, the red coat's a homage to Don't Look Now," and I suddenly thought, "Oh, of course it is." But it was an accident. You know, I avoided this really obscure costume reference of Antichrist that nobody would have thought of.
Yeah,
and walked straight into this real obvious homage. But it's great because it's a talking point, and I'm not hiding from the fact that Nick Rogue's
no, I don't think it's going to be a shame. I mean, I think the look and feel of your film lends the comparison as well. Because
no, it's deliberate then.
Yeah, a red coat on its own isn't a Nick Rogue reference, is it? I mean, the fact you've shot it with 60mm film and the colours are doing what film does. Yeah,
and and it was all in its little Red Riding Hood and all that kind of stuff. You know, so it's got a real lineage to it, I think.
Brilliant. Well, look, ENYS MEN is out in cinemas in UK and Ireland on the 13th of January, 2023. And just give me a say thank you very much for joining us on Britflicks Podcast.
Thanks, Stuart. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
That's not just the sound of that first sip of Morning Joe. It's the sound of someone shopping for a car on Carvana from the comfort of home.
That's a good blend.
It's time to take it easy, like answering some easy questions to get pre-qualified for a car in minutes.
Talk about starting the morning right.
Just like customizing your terms so your car fits your budget. Visit Carvana.com or download the app to experience car shopping the way it should be. Convenient, comfortable.
Man, that sunset is gorgeous.
Grill, patio, sunset. Hard to get better than that. Unless you're browsing Carvana's inventory while you soak it all in.
Oh, burger time.
So sit back, get comfortable. Carvana's got thousands of cars under $20,000 just waiting for you.
I could stay here forever.
Carvana, where car buying meets comfort meets convenience. Download the app or visit Carvana.com today.